Do you know how big an 8 by 8 room is? Since I wear size 10.5 shoes, I can walk across it in just over 9 steps, and I've been doing that a lot lately. You see, for the past 4 months, I have too much free time on my hands, and since I don't have my laptop with me right now, I've been trying to find something to do. I'm either rereading in my mind the periodic table or the formulas I was working on earlier. Sometimes I lie in bed, listening to the sounds around me and trying to identify them to distract myself. I keep telling myself that everything I did was in the best interest of my daughter. I know it was, but now I wonder if I had ulterior motives for doing what I did. I'm not sure of anything else, but that's the story I'm going to stick to, at least until I get out of here. Good morning, Mr. Moore. How are you feeling today? My attorney Victoria Howe asked as I was led over to a long, shiny wooden table and my handcuffs were removed. Pretty good. I've dropped another 2 pounds. I think I'll be at my ideal weight again by Christmas. Did you know I can do 100 push-ups without stopping? Our conversation broke off. All rise, the Fifth Circuit Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Thomas presiding, the bailiff announced to everyone in the courtroom. The judge took her seat and adjusted her reading glasses before looking in our direction. Miss Howe, are you and your client ready to proceed? Yes, Your Honor, Victoria replied. Very good, then please proceed. Victoria, or Vicky as I like to call her, attempted to present another batch of motions. The judge listened to her for what seemed like 10 minutes, not even allowing her to take a breath. Vicky argued that since I had been granted full custody of my daughter Linda, what I was being subjected to was nothing short of cruel and inhumane punishment. Miss Howe, is your client willing to tell the court the whereabouts of his daughter and allow his ex-wife to visit her? Those are the only issues before us today. The court is not challenging his right to custody. However, his ex-wife's rights to visit his daughter are not being honored, and have not been honored for the past 7 months. A condition of his release, as previously stated, is that he must provide the court with information about his daughter's whereabouts. He must also grant his ex-wife court-ordered visitation rights. It goes on to say that his ex-wife is willing to consider court-supervised visitation if she is allowed to see her daughter again. I looked at Victoria and shook my head. Your Honor, Mr. Moore is refusing to provide his daughter's whereabouts at this time. In addition, we would like to file a motion that he be allowed access to a laptop computer so that he can keep up to date on the day-to-day affairs of his company. Contempt, disgust, no, more like anger streamed down the judge's face. It was as if she was saying to herself, "How dare you disobey my order?" Motion denied, Judge Vicky said loudly. Mr. Stephen Moore is to remain in custody in the county jail until he reports the whereabouts of his daughter Linda Moore. The judge then banged her gavel and said, "Next case." Before the bailiff could walk over to return me to my cell, Vicky whispered, "She's got a crush on you, you know that, don't you? She's going to keep you locked up until you tell her where Linda is." I could tell that Vicky, like the judge, was becoming more and more frustrated with me. "Vicky, just do whatever it takes to get me out of here. I don't care what or how." "Steve, tell them." "I can't do that, and you know why. Just go back to your office and do what I'm paying you a lot of money to do. Also, have Carl stop by tomorrow and let me know how things are going at my company," I said, looking at a glum Vicky. "Steve, I'm out of options now." "Vicky, I have faith in you that I will get out of here and celebrate Christmas with my family again. So whatever it takes, get me out of here." I was handcuffed again and escorted back to my cell. That's how my last 3 court hearings went. Vicky was right. The judge was partial to me. She had a reputation for being a hard ass. She wouldn't let anyone mess around with her in the courtroom, no matter how much money they had. And I had a lot. The next day, Carl came by to see me and tell me how my company was doing without me. "Carl, I wish you would smile once in a while. It would lift my spirits for goodness sake," I said with a smirk. "Steve, how can I smile when a bunch of business isn't getting done because you're rotting in this place? Tell them what the hell they want to know so we can get back to running your company." I glared at him. "Okay, I tried. Let's get down to business." For the next hour, he filled me in on how things were going. I trusted this guy with my life, and he never disappointed me. We were still making money, but the negative publicity in the newspapers was getting in the way of our new business. Carl, these idiots do it to look good in the eyes of the media and their shareholders. You and I both know they can't get our products anywhere else in the state, so eventually they'll have to deal with me. However, there are two companies that I want to make pay dearly when they come back. They have lied to me in the press and are going to pay tenfold for every word printed. By the way, how is our other project coming along? I asked, knowing full well that my conversations are always recorded. It's progressing, but slowly and expensively. Carl, I said, looking him straight in the eye, I don't care how much money or people you throw at it. I want it done and done quickly. Do you understand? Yes, boss. I just wanted you to be aware of the expense. I believe my company will be in good shape when I leave, and don't worry, you will be rewarded. One more note, find another group of lawyers to help Victoria Howe. The judge seems to have a personal vendetta against me. Try to get her removed from my case. You know that if that doesn't work, you'll only make her even angrier, don't you? And what are you saying? What's she going to do? Throw me in jail? I hummed. Also, check her background. There should be something in there we can use, I told him, getting up since our hour was up. Take care of my baby, okay? I turned and walked back to my cell. That night, I counted the cracks in the ceiling, and after recounting them 5 times, I came to one more. 21. I'll have to complain to the judge about my apartments, I joked to myself before lying back on the bed. The divorce was nasty, if for no other reason than the fact that I thought it would never happen to us. Thank goodness my father had talked me into drawing up an ironclad prenup, or it could have been much worse. I was just getting established in the industry, and my eyes were blinded by my love for Shalia. I didn't see any need for it at the time. Hell, we were going to love each other forever, but it seems like forever only lasts 8.5 years. Luckily, she agreed to sign it. I guess she thought eternity was forever too, although it wasn't. Like I said, I'm rich, but most of all I'm smart and maybe a little arrogant. I probably could have stayed out of school altogether, but my mom said I needed to get a proper upbringing. That included the school experience, although I was bored most of the time. However, she did allow me to take college courses online, as long as it didn't interfere with my normal life. I graduated from college and earned my bachelor's degree by the time I was a senior in high school. My mom also made sure I went on dates at least twice a month. Most of the girls I dated were dumb as rocks compared to me, and I easily grew tired of their silly teenage looks and games. At 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighing 165 pounds, I wasn't a jock and had the physique to prove it, but I didn't wear arcane glasses or use pocket protection. I was pretty average looking. You know, girls would say to each other about guys like me, well, he's got a great personality. My parents weren't rich, and I drove their used car. I guess you could joke that I was a good catch for a prom queen. Yeah, sure. Mom, I really don't want to go tonight, I told her over and over as she drove me to one social event after another. Honey, do this for me, okay? Find a pretty girl, talk to her, and even ask her to dance. Young man, you may be smart, but you also need to know how to interact with other people. You can't learn social manners from a book. You have to live it through experience, she always reminded me with a smile on her face. Now go and have a nice time. My mom never took no for an answer. She was going to make a social butterfly out of me, one way or another. And me? I'd rather blend in with my surroundings and live my own life, as inconspicuous as possible. However, that wasn't so easy after someone gave me the nickname Brain, and it stuck with me. Kids can be so cruel sometimes. Graduating high school set me free. I got a full scholarship to our state university, and after that, I could do whatever I wanted. I had a double major in chemistry and biology as well as math. In college, I got a grant to research food enzymes, and that's how I met Shalia. She was studying to be a lab technician. 5'6" tall, with light brown wavy hair, brilliant blue eyes, and a beautiful body. She was both smart and pretty in her own way. I may have been the consummate academic, but I could also appreciate a pretty girl when I saw one. I spent most of my time in the lab, and when she came to class, I was always there for her. Every now and then, she would get stuck on some task and ask me a question or two. I was always happy to help her. What started out as just a question turned into full-blown discussions about what I was working on. While Shalia could grasp the concept of what I was trying to do, the principles of how I was doing it usually eluded her. When I took her out to dinner, we shared pizza and a pitcher of soda, and I began to like her much more than just a lab partner. Alas, to my dismay, she told me that studying came first for her, and that while we could date, she wasn't looking for a relationship right now. So we remained just good friends and met from time to time as she allowed. A double doctorate in chemistry and biology and a master's degree in business completed my short-lived college years. I had learned all I could and was now applying for government research grants on my own. With their help, I got two and set up store in a small building. I took out loans, and my parents even mortgaged their house to help me finance a new lab and equipment. When I started working 14 to 16 hours a day, my mom quit her job to help me with the endless government paperwork. This allowed me to focus solely on my work. When I made my first breakthrough, it was especially wonderful because the grants were over and the results and future profits belonged solely to me. When I made my second and third breakthroughs, my father quit his job and became the manager of my business. Life was stressful, but good. The one thing I never realized was that when you want to hire a good person, you don't have to look for them. You just have to give them a reason, and they will find you on their own. I felt I needed two top-notch people to help me in my work. I looked for the best in the field. I wasn't making a lot of money, but with the right people, I felt I could become one in a couple years, especially after I found out that my 4 patents would probably be approved next year. I interviewed probably 20 people who thought they were good, but by the time I was done with them, they left with their tails tucked. Katie was recommended to me by an old high school friend of mine. She was very shy and almost never made eye contact with me, but she was very bright. Kathy, tell me about yourself. What is your home life like? I asked. She looked at me and said she lives with her parents and younger brother. She doesn't have a boyfriend, which didn't surprise me, but she needs a job now that she's out of high school. Her grades were excellent, and even though I couldn't pay a hell of a lot, I offered her a job. Katie, I can offer you $2,000 a month to start. You will be paid a salary, not work by the hour. I expect you to do your job because I won't have time to babysit you. If you do what I ask, you will grow with the company, and so will your paycheck. Mr. Moore, will there be a certain dress code here? She asked, blushing slightly. Kathy, I don't care. The important thing is that you do your job. My answer made her blush even more. She agreed, and I needed another employee. Carl worked for a large pharmaceutical company. He was making a huge salary, but because of office politics, he was denied a promotion. He was more than angry. He was what I was looking for, but we were far apart in what I could afford to pay him and what he thought he was worth. When he got an offer from another company, we met again. He threw the offer on my desk to show me that he wasn't fooling me about the amount. Carl, if I were you, I would take that offer and run with it. However, in 3 years, when I'm doing great and this amount is chump change, I hope you'll feel the same way, I said as I handed him the papers back. But if you accept my last offer, I will give you 1% of the stock in my company next year, and every year after that up to 5%. So you can take the money that's on the table now, or work hard and have a real future in the future. The choice is yours. It took 2 days, but he accepted my offer and I was ready. We were growing fast, and I needed extra help both in the lab and in the office. One day, while out to get lunch for everyone at the nearest subway, I ran into Shalia. She was standing in line, about 4 people ahead of me. I hadn't seen her since she was in her last year of college. As she passed me with her order, she stopped to talk and we ended up having lunch together. She worked in a small lab 2 miles away and didn't make much money. Shelia decided she needed experience before asking for what she thought she was worth. What are you focused on in terms of money? I asked. Right now I make $1,500 a month with no benefits. I figure I'm worth at least $2,000 in full health insurance, she told me without blinking an eye. Can you type? What do you mean, can I type? It's a simple question. Can you type more than just poking at a keyboard? Not all of it, she replied, not realizing where this conversation was going. Well, if you can type and you don't have any trouble keeping file cabinets and doing various lab work, I'd like to offer you a job. Steve, who do you work for? Myself. I have my own lab on Canal Street. Right now, I have 2 employees and my parents working for me, and we could all use a little help. Here, I said, holding out my business card to her. Think about it. Come by sometime after work and I'll give you a tour. I'd love to talk some more, but I'm having lunch here and they won't be happy I'm so late. Think about it, Shelia, I suggested again. Where have you been? I'm starving, Carl asked Carl. Met an old friend and offered her a job, I said, handing over the food. Her? Someone I should know about? He pronounced with a goofy grin. Just a girl I dated a few times in college, that's all. And what would her duties be, pray tell? Carl, you really are an asshole, I waved him off, tossing him a can of Coke. Just asking, boss, but you don't have to tell me if it's too personal. Everyone laughed except Mom. Shelia came in on Thursday after work. She knocked on the door, and when no one answered at the front door, she tried the door, found it unlocked, and walked in. Anyone there? She shouted as she walked through the door into the lab. Dad and I were the last ones in there, so I stood up to greet her. Shelia, I'm glad you could make it, I said as I approached her. Shelia, this is my father Ken, I introduced them to each other. My father held out his hand. Dad, Shelia and I went to high school together, I explained. So this is the woman you offered the position to? He asked, sizing her up. Shelia, let me give you a tour of my baby. For the next 2 hours, I told her in detail about where we were now and where I estimated we would be in the next couple years. We just signed 3 new contracts and are expanding to a larger facility. My dad has secured the funding, and by Christmas we'll be twice the size we are now. Sheila, I think you would be a good addition to our group, and I can match the salary you are looking for. Don't you want to look at my resume before you offer me a job? You're forgetting that we already worked together in college. Steve, you worked and I went to school. Well, I know you're smart, hardworking, and partial to new ideas. With those qualities, you'll be a great addition to our staff. Well, in that case, I accept your offer. It's true that I need to give my current employer a week's notice, but I can start right after that. We shook hands. Father looked on without saying a word. I expect you on the 15th early in the morning. Wear what you're comfortable in. We have a free Friday every day of the week here. You don't have to worry about lunch. One of the perks is we provide lunch and dinner if you have to stay late. 10 minutes later, she was gone, and Dad and I finished the job. You like her, don't you? Dad, she's just a girl I've dated a couple times, that's all. Steve, remember you're talking to me, he replied without a shadow of a smile. We have a rough 6 months ahead of us, and I need you to keep your head down until we move and get settled in. Dad, you worry too much. Son, this is my job. Shalia started working, and it was better than I expected. She grasped everything quickly and turned into an asset almost overnight. Everyone was happy for me except my father. He had been watching my feelings for Shalia grow, and while receptive, he was also cautious. Why doesn't Dad like Shalia? I asked Mom one evening. Steve, he likes Shalia, but he thinks you have too much on your plate right now for romance. Mom, Dad proposed to you on your 3rd date, and you were married 2 weeks later. And he thinks I'm in too much of a hurry? She laughed. You know your dad. He'll take care of you until the day he dies, but I'll talk to him. Shelia and I met when we had time, and when we didn't, we improvised. One Saturday night, about 3 months later, she asked the question of all questions. Steve, I'm your girlfriend, aren't I? Well, if you're not, I don't know what we've been doing for the last 7 hours. No, silly. I mean, we're together, right? I sat up, leaning my back against the headboard of the bed, and took my glass of wine from the table. Okay, what's up? I asked, taking a sip and handing it to her. I just want to know that we're hitting the road together, that's all. In other words, you want to make sure I'm not just using you, I said with a laugh, reaching for her. Asshole, she replied, hitting me with a pillow. Do I owe you an explanation? I'm falling in love with you and I know you like me, but I'm not sure how much. There, I've said it all, she continued. She finished her wine and stared at me with a concerned look. So? Does that mean I have to give up all the other hotties I've been having fun with every night? I joked. But when she didn't smile, I realized she was being serious. Look, babe, I care about you a lot, and I think you know that. It's love, I guess. Yeah, but give me some time, okay? We'll have a nice break after the move, and we can explore all our avenues and possibilities. Steve, I think we've explored all my options except one, and that's not going to happen anytime soon. I just need to know I'm not being played, that's all. Shelia, there are two things I don't do. I don't lie and I don't play games with those I care about, I said. Now that we've got that sorted out, what's one way I haven't checked it out yet? After that, we became an official couple and everyone knew and accepted it, even my father. The next few months were brutal. Things were going well, and combined with the move, we had very little time for each other. By December 15th, we moved into our building, and by the 22nd, we had everything up and running just in time for Christmas. We closed the facility between Christmas and New Year's, and everyone went on vacation. We spent Christmas Eve at her parents' house and Christmas Day at mine. By the evening of the 25th, we were exhausted. Since we were both still living with our parents, we spent more and more time together at the Hampton Inn. Steve, she said quietly, I need something from you. Steve, look at me, okay? I want us to have our own apartment. That made me stop and look at her for real. I'm serious. I think it's time we got our own place. Steve, I'm 23 and you're 27. Don't you think it's time for us to live on our own? For the money we're spending on hotel rooms, it would probably pay for itself. She added with doubt in her voice. That is, only if you want to. I realized that this question was bound to come up sooner or later, and I had already given it a lot of thought. After the move, things would go back to normal, whatever that was. I really liked the idea of having our own place. Okay, when do you want to do that? I think that question caught her off guard. I think she had prepared herself for an argument, and now she just sat there looking at me until her brain finally got to what I had just said. Oh my God, this is going to be so great. We'll have our own apartment and we won't even have to wear clothes if we don't want to. She was bouncing on the bed. When she stopped and took a serious look on her face, I got a little worried. How do you think your parents will take this news, especially your father? Let me worry about that. It'll be your job to find us a suitable place near work that meets all our needs. I don't need a huge apartment, a spacious kitchen, and this will suffice. It took about 3 weeks, but we did find the right place and moved in together. My parents wanted to know what my intentions were, but I told them I wanted to get to know Shelia better. I think you know her well enough, Mom said, winking at me, judging by all the bills from the Hampton Inn I've paid over the past few months. Dad didn't say a word, but he knew he couldn't control me anymore. Life was good. Over the next 2 years, my business grew rapidly, and we expanded once more until we finally moved to another, larger location. At Christmas that year, I proposed to Shelia, and she accepted. My father insisted on a prenuptial agreement, and although I objected, Shelia would not sign it. I made 2 changes to it so it wouldn't be so rigid, but in the end, we all got what we wanted. 3 months later, Shelia got pregnant, and Mom was beyond happy. When Linda was born, Shelia quit her job and stayed home to care for her. She was beautiful and looked a lot like her mom. She had the same light brown hair, blue eyes, and a small mole on her right ankle. Mom and Shelia became friendly as thieves while Dad and I ran the company. The next 5 years were successful for us. My business nearly quadrupled in size and my staff grew from 4 to 14. I was still usually swamped with work, but Shelia required me to attend dinner at least 3 nights a week. We bought a nice house, more than we needed, and when she had some free time, Shelia took up charity work and fundraising for the Children's Wish Foundation. Kids, not another event this weekend, I whined. I thought the three of us would sneak out and have a little fun, I said as I put my arm around her waist and kissed her. If you cancel the event, I'll make sure you won't regret it, I said pleadingly. Honey, you know that Saturday's auction is very important to me, and it's for a good cause, she replied, kissing me. These kids can't escape for the weekend, but if we raise enough money, we can at least make some of them smile. She had a good heart, and although I didn't like it, she was right. So, Saturday night we all went. I told my parents that if I had to go, they should go too. They didn't care, except Dad said he wouldn't dance no matter what Mom said. It was a pretty pleasant evening until I met Ken and his wife Connie. He was working with Shelia to organize the event, and I already knew that he owned a successful airplane parts company just outside of town. Their biggest customer was the US government, and with 2 wars going on, things were going well. Steve, this is Ken and Connie Collins, my wife introduced us. Ken has been a tremendous help in acquiring the items we will be auctioning off today. It's not a big deal. I just visited a few places and shamed them into giving twice as much as they had planned, and got the rest of us to donate money to the cause. Ken, don't be so modest. Because of what you did, we'll be able to send over 100 kids to various camps this summer. You should be proud of yourself. Well, if it hadn't been for Connie, I never would have been able to do it. She's been running the company while I've been gallivanting around raising funds. Looking at his wife and smiling, he said, I don't know what I would have done without her. The smile she answered him with was pleasant, but forced. It was the fake smile one gives a man when they are angry and don't want him to know it. Ken, I see a few people over there I want you to meet. Maybe you can talk them into giving a few extra dollars. It was nice meeting you two, Connie said as she pulled away from her husband. The only thing I knew about him was that he had money and let everyone know it. I think pompous and arrogant would be good words to describe Ken. But I knew Connie very well. She came from an old state and was tough as nails. She was an excellent negotiator and a worthy adversary to her competitors. She was more than qualified to run the business while her husband did the fundraising and entertained. But she didn't seem too happy about it. Now that's someone I wouldn't want to cross paths with, I thought to myself. The dinner was delicious, and the speeches as usual long. Everyone was thanked for their help, especially Ken and Shelia. After dinner, the music came on and my father cringed. My mom talked him into dancing, and I took great pleasure in enclosing my favorite wife in a hug. I wasn't upset when Ken asked Shelia to dance. Although there was nothing funny on the dance floor, I was embarrassed by the way he held her, talked to her, and laughed with her as they moved to the music. This was the only dance Ken would get with my wife that evening. When the auction began, everyone got involved, with one item or another selling for twice the price, knowing it was going to a good cause. When it came to the big lots, the bids didn't come in as freely. We all knew money was tight everywhere. I bought 2 mid-priced items, and that was all I was going to do until Shelia asked if I would bid on a weekend trip to wine country. Please, honey, do it for me, okay? How could I refuse? The bidding was going at breakneck speed, and it looked like Ken wanted it badly for some reason. When I made the last bid, Ken immediately bid $1,000 higher, and since there were no other bidders, he won. When he went over to claim his prize, he said he did it to take his wife there for her birthday. Everyone clapped and admired such a nice gesture, but his wife did not. She just sat there sipping wine from her glass. There seems to be trouble in paradise, I said to myself. Steve, we should have won this trip, Shelia pouted. Han, for the money he paid for it, we could have gone for a week instead of 3 days. Steve, he did it for his wife. What a romantic gesture. If you want romance, just wait until I bring you home, my love. That's not romantic. Okay, I'll buy you flowers on the way home. How about it? She just looked at me in a way that wasn't enough. And that's how it started. They say a cockroach can fit through a 1/64th inch gap just by squeezing in. For me, Ken was exactly that, and now I wished I had stepped on him when I had the chance. However, life went on. I worked, Sheila was still doing charity work, and the three of us were one big happy family until May 21st. It was getting late, and I was mulling over some papers when I glanced at my watch. 7 o'clock, and it was time for me to leave. I turned off the light and walked down the hall to Mom's office. She was sitting with her head resting on her desk. I don't pay my employees to sleep on the job, even if they did give birth to me, I said with a loud laugh. But she didn't budge. Mom, wake up. Dad is going to kick my ass if I don't get you out of here. I walked over to her and put my hand on her shoulder. It was cold, stone cold. When they finally arrived, the paramedics couldn't revive her. She was gone. They said it looked like a heart attack, but they couldn't be sure until they did all the tests. For the next 24 hours, everything happened in slow motion. I heard voices, but they were somewhere far away, and I just didn't pay attention to them. There must have been a lot of tears, people telling me how sorry they were, but nothing could be heard. It was my mom, the one staple that was always in my life. Steve, honey, is there anything I can help you with? Honey? My wife asked more than once, but there was really nothing anyone could do except bring my mom back. My daughter was crying and I held her until she stopped. And then I started, but my crying never stopped, at least not inside. A part of me died that day, and I didn't realize how big a part until months later. Carl and the other managers backed up Dad and me. Dad knew Mom was sick, but they both agreed not to say a word to anyone, including me. All the arrangements had been made in advance, so nothing had to be done. I didn't eat or drink and occasionally forced myself to breathe. I don't remember much about the funeral. I know that physically I was there, but only physically. There were a lot of people at the funeral, and I was told there was a lovely article written about her in the paper, but I never read it. Mom wasn't there, and she didn't take me with her this time. My dad was always the one who kept me in line, but my mom did the rest. She filled my emotional needs as a child and taught me how to be the person I became. In her eyes, I saw the world as something to conquer, and when Linda was born, we became even closer, if that's even possible. When she died, I was lost. I felt empty inside. I think I died for a while too. Dad and Shalia gave me the help I needed. With counseling and lots of medication, I began to return to the ranks of the living, but it took almost 5 months. I was functioning at work, and if you didn't know any better, you'd swear I was fine, until I left the privacy of my lab. I think it was especially hard on Shalia and Linda. They couldn't get through to me, and though they tried, I never responded. Life went on without me. Carl was a godsend, and one day I called him and told him so. He asked if there was anything else he could do for me, and I told him he had done more than I could ever ask for. The week after the funeral, my father went to work with renewed vigor. More than once, Carl had to tell him to go home, or he would physically remove him from the office. As the two of them grew the business, I tried to come to terms with the fact that Mom was no longer with us. It was a little over 6 months after the funeral when I first realized something was wrong. Steve, I'm off to a fundraiser tonight. Should be back before midnight, Shalia said as she got dressed. Don't you want me to come with you? I asked. I don't need a zombie for a date. Take your meds, and I'll see you when I get back. That was cruel, I thought. Do you want me to at least drive you? That won't be necessary. Ken will pick me up, she said, putting on her earrings. I think my look said it all. What? What is that look you're throwing at me? This is a fundraiser, not a date. With those words, I walked over to my medicine bottles, opened them, and poured the contents down the toilet. Steve, what are you doing? Something that should have been done months ago. Give me 20 minutes to get dressed. And you call Mr. Ken and tell him I'll be accompanying my own wife to dinner. I looked at her, and she realized she had better not say anything right now. A large crowd had gathered, and everyone was still expressing condolences for my loss. I thanked them, but immediately changed the subject. Seeing the cockroach, I prepared my heel. Steve, you look good. How are you doing? Never better, Ken, I said aloud, inwardly frowning in disgust. I guess he understood anyway, because he apologized and stepped back. That wasn't very friendly, Shalia whispered to me. I have no reason to be friendly with him, was all I said. After dinner, when the music started up, I asked Shalia if she wanted to dance. Do you mind? She asked. I'm not dead yet, I replied, smiling. And we danced for the next half hour. It felt good to hold her in my arms again, and then it happened. Hey, old man, can I dance with your beautiful wife? Asked Ken, already reaching for her. No. I guessed from the surprised look on his face that he wasn't used to being turned down. It took Shalia by surprise, too. Steve, it's just one dance, Shalia pleaded, looking at me. What do you mean, no? Don't you understand? Okay, let me repeat it slower so you understand what I'm saying. No, you will not dance with my wife now or ever again. Now, do you understand, or do I need to write this down for you? I said, looking him straight in the eye. No problem, he said, and fled. Steve, that was rude. Shalia, did you want to dance with him and not me? Of course not. Why would you ask that? Because you looked at me like that when I basically told him to go to hell, that's all. After that night, my mind started imagining a lot of things. Did we make love that night when we got home? No. She complained that she had a bit of a headache. The next morning, I left long before Shalia woke up. I came in first. Good morning, boss, Carl said as he came into the room and dropped his stuff and started making coffee. You look good. How are you feeling? Like I could chew the ass out of a dead dog, so please don't mess with me this morning, I growled at him without a smile. Well, it looks like the old Steve is back with us. Maybe we can catch up. For the next 2 days, I didn't come home. I slept in my office, showered, and since I had a couple changes of clothes, all I needed was some food. I had already unplugged my cell phone, unplugged my work phone, and told everyone to leave me alone. I checked and rechecked the test results from the last few months and found that too many things had fallen through the cracks. I called a meeting. Listen, guys, if you still want to work here on Monday, I strongly suggest you get your heads out of your asses and do your jobs, or I will find someone else to do them. This is my only warning. Next time I'll be cutting your severance pay. Do I make myself clear? There were many nods, a few startled looks, and a few pissed off people, but everyone got the point. When Shalia arrived just before 5, Carl warned her not to come into my office. I don't know what the hell happened between you two, but I wouldn't go in there if I were you. It doesn't scare me, she replied. So, is this your funeral? He turned away. When she walked in, I didn't look up. I knew who it was, but I wasn't going to play her games today. Steve, she said once, and then said it louder the second time. Steve! I looked up, and my eyes said it all. Are you coming home for dinner tonight? She asked. That's a good question. Make up your mind about the house. What are you talking about? It's a simple question, Shalia. Define what home is and why the hell should I go there? Okay, I'll play your stupid games. Home is where we all live and where you have to come eat and sleep every night, she replied wryly. You see, that's my point of view. That's where I lived with my loving family. It was my fortress of solitude where I could be myself, play with my beautiful daughter, and make love to my wife. Now I'm going to ask you again. Why do you want me to go to a place where I know I'm not welcome? Steve, you haven't been there in months. When your mom died, you left us, and for a while I didn't think you were coming back. She died and you didn't, or you weren't supposed to. It may have been hard for you, but how do you think we all felt, knowing there was nothing we could do? I don't know how often I reached for you in bed, hoping that just once you would take me in your arms. I wanted so badly to make things better for you by chasing away all your demons, but you never let me in. I tried, God knows I tried, but I finally gave up and decided to wait for you to come back or die. One of the two had to happen eventually. So when did you and your buddy Ken start dating? We're not a couple, he's a good friend. He was someone to talk to, someone to confide in when you weren't around. A friend with benefits? I haven't made love to anyone since the last time we did it. What we did back when you were a walking zombie was nothing more than masturbation, just using each other's bodies. But I'm not going to wait for you forever anymore. Unless you decide you want to continue our marriage, I want out. At this point, not only was she screaming, but tears were streaming down her face. Okay, then you have to make me one and only one promise before I make that decision, I told her. Anything. Don't rush to answer, Shalia. Before I ask, you might not fulfill it. Steve, I said anything, and I mean it. Good. I don't ever want you to talk to or see Ken again. You can't be serious, that's stupid. I'm not going to compete with Ken for my own wife. You have to make a choice. It's either him or me. You can't have us both. And since I'm such a nice guy, I'll let you think about it until I get home tonight. Then you can either call and tell him you won't talk to him anymore, or you can come see him later. I don't know what his wife will say to that, but that's for the three of you to decide. She looked at me, said something under her breath, and left, slamming the door. Well, at least I'll know if I have a wife in about 2 hours, I said sadly to myself as I sat back down at my desk. For the next 2 hours, I did nothing, just sat there, oblivious to everything around me. The drive home was short, too short, and when I pulled up to the dark house, at least I had an answer. With slumped shoulders, I walked to the door, wondering what she had written in her note, and if she had even bothered to leave it at all. I unlocked the door, walked in, and threw my laptop on the couch. I felt like my mother had died anew, and I was falling headfirst back into that dark cave. Never again, I told myself. My house had never been so empty, I thought. Life was good again. The next day, with a smile on my face, I brought everyone breakfast and slipped into my office. I spent the next half hour staring out the window. I was living my life again. After my mother died, my father tried to live at the factory, but eventually I made him take a leave of absence. I sent him on a 2-week cruise, and he came back with a smile on his face and bouncing around. I guess he was lucky. When he went to halftime, I was a little concerned, but when he applied to me 3 months later, I was more than happy for him. Dad had paid his dues and deserved a long retirement. He still helped me with advice when needed, but Carl took his place and worked just as hard as Dad did. I, on the other hand, worked hard, but made sure I didn't overdo it. Shortly before our 8-year anniversary, there was an accident in the lab, and one of our new employees got hurt. He wasn't hurt badly, but enough that OSHA swooped in with both feet. By the time they were done, I felt like I'd been subjected to a full body search by a nurse with freaking big hands. In all of this shit, I had somehow missed our anniversary, and by the time I remembered, the damage had already been done. Sheila had planned for the two of us to go away, but because of the OSHA inspection, I just couldn't leave at that time. You love this business more than you love me. I'll never be able to compete with this damn lab, she yelled at me. Hey, honey, we can go wherever you want to go as soon as they leave, which should be very soon. But she didn't want to hear it. We were still close, but at the same time, there was a lingering feeling that all was not well between us. We seemed like a happy couple, but something was wrong, and I couldn't figure out what it was. In the last couple years, Shalia was no longer as active as she used to be, working with the Children's Wish Foundation. However, after her accident in the lab, she got back into action. We talked about giving our daughter a sibling, but now she has rejected the idea. We're not getting any younger, and if we're going to do it, we should think about it as soon as possible, I told her. Steve, I'm not sure I want to go through all that again at my age. Linda is at an age where she has it easy, and I like my freedom. Let's think about it for a couple months, okay? No problem. I love you and Linda enough that I don't need another, if that's what you want. So, 3 months later, she said it would just be the three of us. Did I care? Not really. I had everything I wanted right now. How that cockroach crept back into our lives, I'll never know, but it did. Ken and his wife separated, and she got about 45% of his business. He wanted her to get stock in the company, but she wanted cash, and he ended up going into debt to pay her off. Her son wanted to live with his father, and their daughter went with Connie. There were rumors that Ken was playing dumb. Instead of divorcing, since there was no prenup, they just split everything up and went their separate ways. It couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. When we saw him at one of the dinners, Shalia just looked at me. Steve, we're going to run into him from time to time. It's inevitable, she told me as she watched him walk in our direction. Good evening, guys. I haven't seen you in a while. For Shalia's sake, I was more than nice outwardly anyway. Good evening, Ken, I said, extending my hand. You're looking well. I'm sorry to hear about you and your blunders. I could look like I cared. In fact, inside I was gloating. You know, sometimes things work out and sometimes they don't, but life goes on. I heard you had a little mishap in your lab. I hope no one was badly hurt. It was a rookie mistake. It took a long time to prove it to Asha. They still nailed me pretty hard, but as they say, life goes on. Well, I've got to go, and I see 2 new pigeons that haven't donated yet today. Take care, and I hope to see you again, he said with a wide grin and left. In your dreams, I thought to myself. See, that wasn't so hard. We can still stay friends for the sake of the kids. She was right about the kids, but not Ken. I still didn't trust that son of a bitch, and I never would. Suddenly, it felt like we were running into him everywhere we went. What struck me was that he had never been with another woman. He was still good-looking and had more than enough money to satisfy any woman he wanted. It didn't bother me. It was just an observation. Okay, I let my guard down. I suppose Shalia, bumping into Ken here and there, thought that what I'd asked her to promise years ago was now null and void. But that wasn't the case for me. That 1/64th chasm had gotten even bigger. I never knew about the luncheons or the fundraising visits to other companies until a CEO of another company in the tri-state area I knew mentioned in passing that my wife and Ken had asked him for a donation 2 weeks ago. I assume it's for a good cause and your wife knows how to sell it. You should put her back on your payroll. However, that guy she was with, if it was just him, I'd probably still donate, but not as much as I do now. Between you and me, I wouldn't trust him one bit. But I guess that's just me. I don't trust almost anyone unless they're like your wife. He laughed, and I didn't. I waited almost 2 months before I said anything. I hoped she would tell me, but she never did, even though I left a bunch of hints. I finally exploded when she told me she was going on a 2-day fundraising trip. Are you going alone, or is Ken going with you? Shelia looked like I'd punched her in the gut with my fist. She was busted, and she knew it. Yeah, he's probably going with me and Gary. I think you know we've been raising money together for a while now, she said, sipping from her glass of water and waiting for what she knew was about to happen. I thought we had a deal? Yeah, but back then you were jealous of everyone who wore pants. I think we're both grown up and above that childish jealousy, plus we're all scheduled for 3. It's a huge 2-day swing that will take us 2 to 3 days. We need to get the funds before summer starts, so we know how many kids we can send to camp. Shelia, you promised me, remember? Grow up, okay? This is about the kids, not Ken. Steve, I'm an adult. I don't need your damn permission, and I'm going, it's too late to cancel. All those months you sat idle, and then when you missed our anniversary, I told you I wouldn't let you go back to work? No, we got over it. Shelia, you have no idea what you're doing. Steve, sometimes I just stop understanding you. That's how we broke up that night. Did we make love before she left? Do you think? Now that chasm was 1/8 of an inch wide. We followed each other around until she left, and for months after that. Did we make love again? Yes, but it wasn't the same. It was like we were both holding back, not wanting to give everything to each other. I tried to tell her we needed to talk, but all I got in response was sadness. Week after week, the gap widened. I tried many times to fix the situation, but we were going against fate. I'm going out of town on Tuesday and will be back Wednesday afternoon, she informed me. I need to find the last 3 companies to put us in the lead. No, was all I said. No to what? She replied. Yeah, if you're planning on going with Ken, then no, you're not going. Steve, we've been through all this before. I told you the reasons last time. And you promised me you wouldn't have any contact with Ken. I think we know how well you kept that promise. She only threw me an angry look. Steve, I'm leaving, she said, nipping at my heels. Like I said last time, think before you speak. You might not like the consequences of what you're about to do. I'm leaving, and nothing you say or do will change that fact, she muttered. She left on her trip and I stayed home and busied myself with rearranging our bedroom. Where's all my stuff? She asked when she returned. In your new bedroom. What new bedroom? Where the old guest room used to be. That's where all your stuff is. Fire burst out of her eyes. Great! Just great! She hissed, running back upstairs. It had been hell on earth since then, and in more ways than one. Now she flaunted her trips in front of me, almost expecting a confrontation, but I never gave her the satisfaction. When she stopped inviting me to fundraisers, I got angry but said nothing. When she invited the jerk into the house, I made sure he left without her, but not before I smashed his windshield with a tire iron. It was getting worse, so I asked him to follow her. I was waiting for her when she came home on Saturday just after midnight. I had a drink in my hand and sat in the dark. I replayed everything I was going to say 100 times or more in my head, but when she walked through the door, I forgot everything. Shelia. Steve, is that you? We need to talk. We can talk in the morning. I'm tired and all I want to do is go to bed. It's now or never. It's up to you, I told her. Okay, it's your call. What do you want to say? She sighed vindictively, putting her hands on her hips. Is it officially over now? Steve, what the hell are you talking about? What's over? Our marriage. Steve, what do you want? I want my wife back, but I don't think that's going to happen, do you? We haven't been husband and wife for months. And I think I've been replaced. She said nothing. Well, I had to try again anyway. Steve. I stopped her before she could say anything else. There are pictures of your last fundraiser with Ken on the counter. I half expected it to hang like some Greek god, and I'm a little disappointed. I saw her eyes redden. Here's how it's all going to go down. Tomorrow you will be taken to the house, and you will have 48 hours to leave the premises. There will also be a court order stating that you will not be allowed within 100 feet of this or any other house I own. You will be able to see Linda whenever you want, but only in this house. Obviously, Ken was more important to you than your own family. It finally began to get to her. Then she started to cry. I'm so sorry, it just happened, and I don't remember much of it. Shelia, that just doesn't happen. He planned the whole thing, and you were stupid enough to fall for his heartwarming stories, or he was comforting you because I wouldn't let you see him. Maybe I wasn't so stupid after all. You can't take Linda away from me, Steve. I already have. Get yourself a good lawyer because you're going to need one. By the way, along with the divorce papers, I'll send a copy of our prenup. It will be a good read for you and your lawyer. With those words, I left for the last time. I didn't feel like doing what I was about to do, but she left me no other choice. Ken paid for Shalia's lawyer. It didn't do her much good. I thanked my father for every day I spent in court. No matter how hard they tried, this agreement was impossible to break. My team, and yes, I said team, of attorneys had gotten me full custody because I could provide for Linda, while Shalia would have to go back to work to make ends meet. She received a lump sum of $50,000, a paid-for BMW, all her clothes and jewelry except those that belonged to my mother, and finally, liberal visitation privileges. We agreed on 2 times a week and every weekend. I knew she would eventually move in with Ken because her parents had practically disowned her, but for my daughter's sake, I decided I would act on the high ground. It all happened quickly. In a little over 3 months, our divorce was finalized, and I was free of both of them. Whenever I saw them at an event or on the street, Ken would tell me, I stole your wife, and Shalia would always avert her eyes. Like I said, I tried to keep a low profile until something became clear. Daddy, I don't want to sleep over at Mommy's anymore, Linda told me one Friday night. Linda, honey, your safety means more to me than any trouble your mom can get me into. I love you. Now go upstairs and let me deal with your mom. Okay, I was wrong. Sheila called me every name possible when I told her I wouldn't let Linda go with her. My dad had always helped me in the past, but now I was asking him for something that could get me in a lot of trouble, and yet I had no one else I could confide in. Dad, I need you to take Linda with you. Leave the country tomorrow. I lose this case and they'll make me give Sheila overnight visits with Linda. Dad, I won't put Linda in danger. Here's her passport, birth certificate, and 5 cashier's checks for $100,000 each. That's enough money for you to live on until things settle down. I don't want to know where you'll end up, but it better be someplace away from the road if you know what I mean. Let me know sometime in 6 months, and if you don't hear back, wait another 6 months. Steve, I'm meeting someone right now, and if you don't mind, I'd like to take her with me. You old dog, I said, smiling. Take whoever you want, but it has to be tomorrow morning. I don't have time. On Thursday, I kissed my daughter goodbye. I didn't know how long it would be before I saw her again, but I knew it wouldn't be long. She cried and apologized, and I told her she had nothing to be sorry for. I kissed and hugged her one more time and she left, bringing only a small pink backpack with her clothes and her stuffed bunny. I didn't sleep that night, and in the morning I was back in court. Mr. Moore, the court orders you to renew your visitation rights with your ex-wife, effective today. You will deliver Linda to her mother today, or be held in contempt of court. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, I understand, was all I told her. As I left the court, I walked over to Carl and told him what was likely to happen. It will be up to you to keep my baby running smoothly. Do whatever you need to do. Here's my power of attorney, so you can legally sign my name to anything you need. I don't know how long it will take, but I have faith in your ability to do the right thing. After that, I went home, poured myself a stiff drink, and waited. My phone kept ringing. I knew who it was, so I just let it ring. When Sheila showed up at the house with a police officer, I just opened the door, let her in, and went back to my drink. Steve, where is she? Where's who? I said, playing the game. You know who. Where's Linda? You mean she's not upstairs? Well, then she must be at one of her friends. You know she has a lot of friends. You were supposed to deliver her to me this morning, and if you don't deliver her, this man will take you to jail. You really are a foolish woman, do you know that? Do you really think I would knowingly put Linda in danger for you or anyone else? I guess you never really knew me well. I smiled at her and continued. Like I said, she's probably at her friend's house. My smile pissed her off even more. I was taken into custody, driven downtown, and placed in a cell. The next morning, I appeared before Judge Thomas and was told to bring my daughter in. My attorney, Victoria, did her best, but the judge wanted to hear only one thing from me, the whereabouts of my daughter. Your Honor, I'm not exactly sure where my daughter is, I told the judge. Well, Mr. Moore, perhaps a few nights in a cell will refresh your memory. Mr. Stephen Moore, I find you guilty of contempt of court. You will be held in custody until you provide the whereabouts of your daughter, Linda Moore, and allow Sheila Moore court-ordered visitation. And so it began. After 4 months, Sheila wanted to meet with me. I refused the first couple times, but then curiosity took over. You've lost a little weight, she said, as we sat down at a simple wooden visitor's table. Just getting rid of some extra weight I've been carrying around for the past few years. Steve, I don't want to do that, but I want to see my daughter. She told you what was going on. I warned you, but you just didn't listen, and now we've both lost what we valued most. I changed my petition to court-supervised visitation. Weren't you told? I heard, but I don't believe you anymore. You've gotten good at lying, remember? Steve, this is old news. We have to move on. We're not married anymore. That's your fault, not mine. Does it matter whose fault it was? To me, it does. I've never cheated on you in all the time we've been married. Surely you can't say that, can you? It was only once, you have to believe that. And that was after that big fight that happened before I left. So I guess you figured you'd show up that son of a bitch and spend 2 days in bed with Ken. You played right into his hands. You think I don't know that now? If I told you I was drunk and don't even remember it, would it make a difference? Your man had those ugly pictures and I only have vague memories. I can apologize until hell freezes over, but you'll never forgive me, so what's the point? The point is that I'm not going to let that goddamn son of Ken even come close to our daughter. You may not think that's important, but I do. I don't trust you anymore because even though I gave you a free pass and a way out, you still lied to me, and now you have to live with that decision for the rest of your life. One more thing. Remember those pictures of you and Ken? If they somehow get on the internet, how effective will your fundraising be after that? They might give you a couple bucks for sitting around, but what self-respecting CEO would give money to someone like that? You wouldn't give it? I didn't say I would because I'm in jail where you put me. But if some sneaky bastard wanted to get back at you, I wouldn't be able to stop him. Can you imagine the look on your mother's face if someone emailed them to your house? Or maybe the church they attend? With dates like theirs, everyone could easily figure out what you were doing with someone other than your husband while you were married. Do you hate me that much? You have no idea what I'm willing to do to protect our daughter. I think we know where we stand. Besides, you need to be there to support your new man when his world comes crashing down. Steve, what are you up to? What can I do? I'm in prison, remember? A month later, Carl came to me with his usual news. Steve, I got everything you asked for. Everything checked out and fully documented. We have not one, but two parts, if you know what I mean. I'm ready to get to work. All you have to do is just say the word. Carl, you have to do me a big favor today. I explained to him what I needed. You're kidding, right? No. Do what I asked you to do and then come see me on Thursday. Then I'll let you know how to proceed. Tuesday night, I slept great. I would have slept through breakfast too if the guard hadn't told me I had a visitor. Good morning, Ken, I said with a huge smile on my face. I guess it's a beautiful day outside, although I haven't had a chance to see it in a while. Cut the crap, Steve. Your man said you had something important to tell me. I'm here, talk, you have 5 minutes. Ken, I know Shalia is living with you now. That brought a contemptuous smile to his ugly face. Not only lives with me, but she has fun with me every night, he sniggered. Just stick to the plan, I told myself. Anyway, I want you to kick her out of your apartment today and sign a written agreement that you will never see or talk to her again. Is that understood? Are you out of your mind? And why would I do that? Because if you don't, I'm going to set the hounds of hell on you, and my friend, you're not going to like it, believe me. You stupid weakling, I took your woman, and now you threaten me from here? You're pathetic at best. If that's all you're capable of, I'm leaving. Getting Sheila into bed with me was so easy. 3 drinks with a little extra in each, and she was all mine. Do you know she cried for you for almost 4 days straight? She kept thinking that when the divorce became final, you would change your mind and take her back. You lost. But now a few drops of my special elixir into her drink and she's mine. You can do whatever you want with her. And don't try to blackmail me with those stupid pictures. I set up a camera that first night and burned everything to DVD. Maybe I'll send you a copy if you're polite. He got up to leave. Don't worry, I'll show myself. I had to convince him to tell me what really happened. I felt bad letting him walk out the door, but I knew I'd get the last laugh. Well, boss, what do you want me to do? Said Carl, looking around. Carl, you know what you do to a cockroach if you find one? You crush it under your foot. I told Ken I was going to let the hellhounds out, and he laughed at me. Do it, and do it today. I gave him another set of instructions, and I didn't even care if it was recorded on the prison monitors. 2 days later, Collins Manufacturing Company came under investigation for falsifying test data. It turned out that about 30% of the parts had not even been tested, and the tests that had been done were mostly falsified. Parts that did not meet specifications were given approval stamps, shipped, and displayed to the military. One former employee stated that he could no longer live with the knowledge that parts going into military aircraft did not meet the specifications on the orders. A government spokesman said all open orders have been suspended and all Collins manufacturing assets have been frozen pending further investigation. I think this former employee will sleep much better tonight in his new position, knowing that he did the right thing by disclosing a potentially deadly situation at his previous company. I was feeling pretty good now, even though I was still in jail. Collins Manufacturing's stock dropped like a stone. Ken's face was all over the news for the next few weeks, and criminal charges were now pending. Coincidentally, a videotape of Ken Collins was turned over to the district attorney yesterday. The video shows Ken admitting to an inmate in the county jail that he slipped an unidentified woman something in her drink and forced himself on her not once, but many times. At this time, no woman has come forward to support these charges, but the case is still pending. About a week later, I appeared before Judge Thomas again. Mr. Stephen Moore, you are free to go. Your ex-wife has dropped all charges against you and has asked the court to release you. I don't know what kind of game you've been playing with this court, but I strongly advise that you do not find yourself in front of my bench again. Do I make myself clear? Yes, Your Honor, I replied. Case dismissed, she said, banging the gavel on her bench. The bailiff announces the next case, please. And that was the end of it. Well, Steve, you're a free man, Vicky told me. Hopefully, now that it's all behind you, you can get back to your normal life. Vicky, after what has happened to me over the last 9 months, nothing will ever be normal again. I just hope that all the guilty parties get what they deserve. I walked out of the courthouse and Carl picked me up on the street. How does it feel to finally be free? Wonderful, just wonderful. I've done everything you asked, and your father's flight will arrive at 10 o'clock tonight. It will be routed through customs, so no one will know Linda is back in the country. That won't be necessary anymore. Everyone who was a problem is already behind bars or will be soon. Take me to the nearest bar. I need a cold beer, and I'm not going to wait until I get home. Carl and I headed to the first bar we could find. After Miller Lite and Corona, we walked into Longhorn Steakhouse, and I had a proper meal for the first time in almost 6 months. You look better than anyone I've ever seen, boss. You've lost weight, and you don't have that little bulge around your middle anymore. Do 200 squats and 100 push-ups twice a day, and you'll lose that middle too. I guess Burger King for lunch every day from now on has been eliminated. I laughed and ate the last bite of steak. You know Sheila has been staying at our house for the last couple weeks. When I told her about Ken and his son, she freaked out. I had to get someone to stay with her for the first 2 days until she calmed down. She's still not herself. She wants to know if you're going to talk to her. I said you would see her tonight. I guess I forgot to tell her about Linda and your father coming over tonight. For the past few months, I had been thinking about her and Linda almost every waking hour. I knew that sooner or later I would have to deal with this problem, but I had other concerns. My daughter was coming home. Linda saw me and rushed into my arms, almost breaking my neck, so tight she hugged me. Daddy, I missed you so much. Do I have to go away again? She said with a more than worried expression on her face. Never again, sweetie, never again. Let's go home. My dad walked over with a tall blonde man and stood behind us. He shook my hand and then gave me a hug. You look a little thinner. I guess prison agreed with you, he said with that damn smile of his. Steve, this is Grace. She held out her hand. I took it and said it was nice to meet you, but I think we should get going. All the way home, my dad told me about where they were and how he moved every few weeks to make sure it was harder for anyone to find them. When this is over, I'd like to go back with Grace and see the places we found, he said, looking at her. My father was in love. Carl dropped us off at my house, and I told Linda that her mom was waiting for her inside. She ran into the house. I slowly walked into the house with my dad and Grace. When I walked through the door, I saw Linda and Sheila crying and hugging each other. Sheila looked at me and mumbled, "Thank you." I just nodded and went upstairs. For 2 hours, everyone gave me the news, but finally I saw everyone's eyes start to glaze over. It was time to call it a day. Linda had her own room, Sheila had her own room, and I had my old bedroom. Dad said he would see me in a couple days and came out with Grace. Steve, we need to talk, Sheila tried to say, but I told her we'd have time later. I took a long, hot shower in my own bathroom and went to bed in my own big, soft bed. It was heaven. It took me a long time to fall asleep. I was already used to the night noises from the prison, and my bedroom was almost too quiet. I don't know if Carl or Sheila restocked the refrigerator, but at 7 o'clock the next morning I was just happy to have real food for breakfast. Sheila came down a little after 8 in the white robe I'd given her years ago. "Have you made coffee yet?" "Whole pot. Help yourself," I said, taking a second cup. "Carl called me the day before you met Ken in prison. He told me everything and said it was in my best interest to not even go back to his house to get clothes. He kept me informed of what had happened, and that Ken was far worse than I could have imagined." "Sheila, we shouldn't be talking about this right now," I tried to say, but she interrupted me. "Steve, if I had talked to you months ago, none of this would have happened. But we didn't, and it did. I'm not even going to apologize because those words aren't even close to what I did to you and Linda in my stupidity. Just please don't take my little girl away from me. I can't live without her again." The tears were already flowing, and the hatred I felt was long gone, but she was no longer my wife. "Sheila, you can stay here as long as you want. I'm not going to kick you out. Carl will pick up your clothes at Ken's house tomorrow. You're the least of his problems now," I said with a huge grin on my face. "We're not married anymore, and we never will be. You chose him over me and Linda's safety, and I can never forgive you for that." She began to cry even harder. "For our daughter's sake, you can stay here as long as you want. You'll have your own bedroom, and I'll have mine. Right now, Linda needs both of us to bring her back to reality, not two people pulling her in different directions. So if you agree, that's the way it's going to be, at least for now. The only request is that you don't bring any friends or lovers to my house. Is that understood?" She nodded her head, but I could see she was an exhausted woman. She had lost everything by her own naive delusion, and she knew it. It had been 4 months since Linda had returned. Life was pretty much the same as it had been before things got out of hand. Dad had married Grace in a small family ceremony, and they were now somewhere in Mexico, sightseeing. I asked where he was going, and he just smiled at me. I told him to call me if he ran out of money. My business is doing better than ever, and when I was acquitted in the papers and all those asshole companies that swatted me started crawling back, I wanted to put the whole thing behind me, so I didn't cash in on them, at least not too much. Ken lost everything, and there are a lot of charges against him, and he'll probably spend 20+ years behind bars as the white bitch of someone named Bubba. I hope so. His ex-wife called and said she knows he's scum and hopes we can rebuild our lives. We have lunch from time to time, and she's a really wonderful woman I'd like to get to know better someday. Sheila still lives in the house. She's not dating. She is working part-time in the lab again while Linda is in school. I pay her like any other employee, but I contribute the maximum amount to her 401k each month. If I've learned anything in the last few years, it's that anything can happen when you let your guard down. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the ninth grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, "I'm very sorry." Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, "Get his boss here immediately." It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. "What is that idiot doing?" "All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next." Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. "If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you." I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? "I'm very sorry." Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hope to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.